Broadcasting Association SABA is hosting an Ethics in Digital Broadcasting conference in conjunction with the African Center of Excellence in Information Ethics from the University of Pretoria, South Africa. The objective of the conference is to create awareness on the subject of information ethics in the area of multimedia broadcasting. The conference is having a number of presentations from UNESCO, SABA, the Africa Center of Excellence for Information Ethics, ACEIE, and current ICT-related activity strategies in Namibia. MICT. Now, in the studio, I'm now joined by Bob Butler, the president of the National Association of Black Journalists in the United States of America, and Professor Faxan Banta, the IPDC program specialist at UNESCO. A very good morning to you, and thank you very much for making time out to come join us this morning. First and foremost, of course, before you continue, just a brief for the layman on the street, perhaps Professor Banda, if you can just give us the insight in terms of what exactly is ethics when it comes to broadcasting.
Well, ethics is about doing what is right, what is honorable, by virtue of your position as a journalist. And this is a position of trust, trust between you and the public. You appeal to the public in order to validate your work. And in the end, this is about promoting democracy. It's about encouraging robust citizen participation. And to do that, you do need to have rules in place. And those rules could be called ethics. They're grounded in the evolution of the profession itself. They are philosophical in some cases. They are religious. For example, do no harm to your neighbor. They're African in some aspects. Ubuntu, I am because you are, and therefore my reporting must reflect that interaction between you and me. So in a nutshell, ethics is about how journalism is organized in order to respond to the public interest.
Talking about journalism and responding to the public interest, we've seen that change so much with the advent of digital broadcasting. Mr. Butler, can you perhaps share with us thoughts with regards to the transition between analog broadcasting, moving into digital broadcasting, and some of the opportunities it provided for journalism across the world?
Well, I think if you look back 15, 20 years ago, people got their news from the radio, from the television, or from newspapers. Now, almost every one of these entities has a website, and they put their information on the website even before it gets on to the television or onto the radio. So the information is more immediate. But they also have social media sites, and most people get their information from social media. I did a study in the U.S. a couple of years ago that found that 64% of U.S. adults have a Facebook page, and half of them get their news from Facebook. Well, that's okay, but then who's putting the news on the Facebook page? Is it a journalist who subscribes to journalism ethics of being fair and only telling the truth? Or is it somebody who's putting information out there that is their truth, may not be the actual truth?
And then, of course, obviously, the opportunities have been provided for people to really engage and start giving immediate feedback on some of the information that's going out there. But that also brings the risk of distortion and misinformation. How big of a problem is that in international communication at this point in time?
Well, it is a big problem. Partly it is the price of freedom of expression. And we do need to guarantee that on the internet. At the same time, I think it is as a result of the democratizing nature of communication itself. So the question is one of balancing between freedom of expression and issues such as hate speech and so on and so forth. What I think personally is that what digital communications have done is to liberate the airwaves, to enable people to become more communicative. And that is good in as far as advancing democratic ideals is concerned. But at the same time, it is precisely because of it that we need journalism as a system of self-imposed controls, and also as a system of verifying the information that is put out there. Because you must remember that some of the information that is churned out online is based, first of all, on the content that is generated by journalists. So this is a basis for debate. Journalists put information out there, bloggers, comment on it, and in commenting on it, they might resort to all sorts of things, including inflammatory language. So again, journalists need to come in and make sure that that distortion is held up for what it is. In addition to that, organizations like UNESCO are involved in initiatives like media and information literacy. So with more freedom, with more communications, citizens need to be able to be media and information savvy, to be able to see the distortions for what they are, to see the misinformation for what it is. And that is important because then you're enabling people to be citizens who are living in an information-rich society, but at the same time are critical of that information. And that is why ethics, extends not only to journalists, but also to citizens. Ethics for global citizenship, if you like.
True. Mr. Butler, if one looks at this, and it's quite an important point that Professor Banda raised there, but understanding ethics in a broader context from a universal perspective, I mean, with descriptive ethics, it's easy. You know that it's illegal to buy pirated DVDs. But when it comes to prescriptive ethics, it's a completely different story because every society has their own set of rules they operate on. I mean, how can we overcome that challenge, seeing as we are sort of working on a global village when it comes to digital media?
Well, the point of a lot of the information starting with journalists is absolutely true. But even journalists have to watch themselves because sometimes they might see something on Facebook or on Twitter and they'll say, oh, this is a good story, and they're pressured by their company to be first to put it out there. But the problem is if you put it out there and it's wrong, then you've ruined your credibility, and I think that's a very important point. The ethics of journalism are very clear. You seek to tell the truth, you report the truth, and you make sure that you're right. Citizen journalists don't have that restriction. They call themselves citizen journalists, but if they don't subscribe to the ethics, then you have to worry, well, is what they're telling me actually true? A lot of times they're right. If somebody is out there and they see a car accident and they report this on Twitter or Facebook, I just saw a car accident, and they're on the scene, you can probably believe that they were. But there are cases of people saying that they were someplace and they saw something when they actually didn't, and that's the problem that we have.
But I think that there are some ethical universals. We can't run away from that. They're basic values that all societies hold dear, and truth-telling is one of them. We find this in all cultural systems. Human dignity, we find this in all systems, and it is also part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights anyway. So journalism needs, indeed even blogging itself, needs at the very least to uphold human dignity. And also the notion of non-violence. This is something that has been advocated for from time immemorial. And so if you find hate speech, that incites people to violence, then quite clearly this is something that any ordinary person, should be able to understand. So whereas we can speak of ethics that are sort of refracted through specific geographies, histories and so on and so forth, we do have universals that all societies hold dear. And I think it is our responsibility, and part of the reason why we're here, is to make sure that we stress, these fundamentals that everybody, simply because of being a human being, must uphold.
And this brings me to the big question, of course, of the issue around cybersecurity, so to say. I mean, we've got huge challenges when it comes to privacy and security, and I know that's a huge issue in the United States of America at this point in time, but the pace at which some of the issues are occurring and the pace at which governments are coming together to really start drafting cyber laws, there seems to be a disconnect there.
Well, there are a lot of people out there that would love nothing more than to get all your personal information and open up an account or buy a house in your name, and then you get the bill. They want to pay for it. That's where cybersecurity really is an issue. But it's not just that. It's also people hacking into databases and the Department of Defense and the power grid. They're aware that people can actually hack into the power grid and shut down the power, in a region or a country, something like that. The laws, I think are pretty clear in the U.S., but I think we have other issues that we have to worry about, such as what are the social media policies? What are the guidelines? Do we have guidelines for social media policy? It's funny, yesterday at the conference, the Minister of Communications here in Namibia said that we need guidelines for social media. He told me afterwards, I have a lot of people calling my office complaining that, somebody slandered them, on social media. But what do we do about that? We need guidelines. He wants us to help draft those guidelines.
It's a difficult debate. By way of answering your question, let me just point out that UNESCO in March will be having an international consultation in Paris looking at this whole question, but from a holistic perspective. So we'll be looking at issues of access, we'll be looking at issues of freedom of expression, we'll be looking at issues of privacy, we'll be looking at issues of ethics in as far as the internet is concerned. The overriding consideration for us is that whatever we come up with to develop the infrastructure for cybersecurity, it must be based on a stakeholder approach. Okay. There are so many actors involved, and to get a debate of that magnitude out there requires tolerance, it requires patience, but at the same time, it's something that needs to be done. Overall, it needs to be framed within the context of human rights. That's very, very important to us.
All right. Well, thank you very much for making time out to come and join us. I mean, it is something we can talk about for hours on end, but thank you very much.
Especially with you.
Well, that's Bob Butler, President of the National Association of Black Journalists in the USA, and Professor Faxan Banda, IPDC Program Specialist at UNESCO. This is, of course, what they are talking about at the ongoing conference of the Southern African Broadcasting Association here at the Gateway Center in Windhoek. Stay with us. We'll be back with more.